Hello and welcome to Husky Talk. I am your host, the best podcast host in the universe, Steve Cully. And with me today, my normal, charismatic, enigmatic guest, host, co-host, cohort, Laban Marsh. Laban,
Good.
hello.
Good to see you, Steve.
Also, Kelly Verkler Green joining us as a licensed mental health counselor. Kelly, hello.
Hello.
And the man himself, Dr. Chris Nowinski, the CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation, the pioneer really of CTE, and also an author. He's been on Fox, ABC, NBC, ESPN, CBS, you name it. He's been everywhere, and he is trying to save all of us, especially the ones who played football, from head injuries, and here to educate us a little bit more about CTE. Chris, thank you so much for being with us.
No, thanks for having me, Steve.
Yeah. So Laban has had a little bit of a relationship with you, and I wanted to ask Laban about that. You can kind of tell how that started and why you reached out, because we both have had symptoms that we've been dealing with and figuring out the best course of action of how to treat them and how to move forward and how to live with them really as we get older. Talk about that.
So I originally reached out to Chris after reading his book, Head Games. And I was led to that book through another Dr. Beneo Malu's book. The connection really was we knew him as Mr. Harvard from the Mr. Harvard from the WWE. I went to school in the New England area, so I'm familiar with the Boston accent. And we had a friend that I ran track with, Lissa Bloom, whose brother, Matt Bloom, was Prince Albert in the WWE. And so I know to try to gather associations. And so when I reached out to Chris, I said, hey, I have a little bit of a connection through this. Is there any way, I can just stay in touch? And that was 2009 when I joined Boston University's study of encephalopathy. So I'm a card carrying member. But Chris was at the forefront of all of this. And so I'm just so appreciative for the time. And when I sent him a note and told him that I read his book, he said, hey, get me your contact and I'll be in touch. And it's been 15 years, but every time I send him a message, within 24 hours, he gets back to me. And I think for anybody that's been through head trauma, that paranoia, that insecurity, I appreciate that. I think he understands what we've been through to where he tries to empathize and provide that opportunity to kind of just let it all out, if you will. And so I'm just thrilled that after 15 years of delaying gratification, I get to officially meet you and hear a little bit more about what you're doing. And then finally, if we can get it going, you can see in my background, University of Connecticut alumni, but what you've done with the Concussion Legacy Foundation. I know you've got one there, a helpline at Boston College. And so we would love to be able to offer our fellow teammates, classmates, and future UConn Huskies an outlet if they're having challenges due to head trauma. So thanks for being here and tell us a little more about what you're doing.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. It is great to connect after all these years. I'm trying to adjust my lighting. It's that time of day where I get bad light in my office. So yeah, it's been, almost 18 years now with the foundation, trying to figure out what's happening to us ex-football players. And I think at this point, what we know is that, 15 years ago, people didn't believe CTE was a real disease. They didn't know what it was. Now we know it is. Now we know that some percentage of us who took thousands of hits to the head will get a disease that causes neurodegeneration. And what has become more clear is that what is very strongly correlated is in older age, when you're talking 50s, 60s, 70s, if you have a progressive cognitive decline, and you played at least 5 years, but probably double figures, there's a good chance, or a reasonable chance, you could have CTE. But also, prior to that, we're finding out a lot of people tend to have interesting, troubling, neuropsychiatric symptoms. And I think what the science would say today is that we can't tell very accurately who is developing these symptoms because CT is affecting parts of their brain, who is developing these symptoms because they might have had a bunch of concussions along the way, and traumatic brain injuries can open a door to mental health issues, and then who's just having them organically. And the answer to that really doesn't matter in the sense that for all of them, treatment is going to be very similar, and you need to get it, and it does work. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to help people through the tough times, saying, look, the storyline of CT is what we hear about is the worst of the worst stories and the suicides and the midlife stuff. But the reality of it is most cases are people who do fine most of their life, maybe some odd behaviors here and there. Maybe the families will say they had a short fuse and they could have been nicer, but they were still good people. And then things start to get worse, like many other diseases. So when I'm talking ex-athletes, it's really about, hey, we can get through this, and we're working on it while we try to develop better ways to diagnose this in life, ways to treat this, so that we can all get through it together.
Yeah, Chris. So this past year, like I had played football. I played since I was 9 years old. I played at UConn. I played professionally. And I felt this past year, it kind of hit me all at once. I started having symptoms of memory loss. I started having mood swings. I started having some aggression. And Kelly basically was my lifeline. And she kind of witnessed this progress over the year. And that's what she saw. And I wanted her to kind of tell you about that and the treatment that goes into it that could help me to get past it and move forward in my life.
I think that's where I come in. So I'm obviously an advocate for Stephen here today, as I've seen him most days out of the past year. And I will say, you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
The changes have been pretty drastic. I think the largest concern was the memory loss, repetition of stories, repetition of facts, having to remind him constantly of things that maybe just 5 minutes ago had just been said. And this was picked up by his family. This was picked up by his friends. Other people saw it. I think I was on the front lines a little bit more often than them. So when it comes to the severe mood swings, the random bursts of rage, intense irritability, sometimes this Jekyll and Hyde, like which version am I going to get and when is it going to change? From my background, I immediately was like, we need to get you in to see a neuropsychologist. We need testing, we need assessment, you need a therapist. And he reluctantly agreed and talked to quite a few people. And even me, I'm not his therapist, but I was thinking this has got to be bipolar disorder. This has got to be some form of a mood disorder. But then unfortunately, there was almost a psychotic break that also happened that was very significant. And it's up to Stephen if he wishes to talk a little bit more about that. I think it's pretty personal, but at that point, I realized this is beyond mental health. And I'm curious to know I've heard you talk on YouTube about different types of treatment, and you did mention mental health, therapy, and that's definitely important. And I'd like to know if there's any modalities in particular besides just CBT, evidence-based, kind of the main route that most clinicians take. Is there anything else that you would recommend? That's for a whole nother component of this, but getting back to Stephen, that was really, for me when things started to worsen, violence increased. He was just all over the place. And he did go to see a neurosurgeon. He had an MRI. I feel like a lot of the times he was really brushed off as, hey, you're a football player. You got bumped in the head. What do you expect? And then we would just sit there twiddling our thumbs and saying, but what do we do? Because this behavior can't continue. He can't keep a job. He's getting into accidents. He's constantly falling and hitting his head repeatedly. It just escalated. And I think and his parents are at a point where we need help. And I know he's willing to donate his brain and sign up to get whatever help that you would possibly suggest him to get.
Oh, I appreciate you sharing all that. And Steve, I'm sorry you've been through this. Yeah, I mean, well, this is sort of where the helpline comes in action, because I'm not a clinician, and so I'm not going to advise any specific treatments, but really our job is to help find people the right doctor for their symptoms, who they can believe in and help quarterback their care. Like I've seen lots of people come back from this with the right balance of medications, with the right, I'm guessing you have like a sleep disorder as well. I mean, it's a sort of like standard for the are you an ex-lineman, Steve?
You know it.
Yeah. So, we can recognize each other. So, so like that is off, like you'll find if you can get that under control, you get a very quick cognitive boost, and it might get back to where you were. It doesn't mean the CT's not there, whatever else, but it doesn't usually get you in your 30s like this. It's usually other things that are going on. So, and you live in Connecticut?
I'm in New York right now, but yes,
sorry.
What part? Connecticut. I live in Utica, New York.
Okay. So I mean,
it's a dump. So
we have people. So basically, we have our favorite people. Whether it's
he's in his 40s. So this is really hitting hard. I'd say around like 41, 42, and I don't believe per other people's reports that it really presented strongly. But you were also on a lot of different medications, none that have really worked out well for him.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean,
I also struggled. I had a drug addiction problem, and I went through that for a year. I went to rehab. I got that taken care of. And I know sometimes, and that happened after I was playing. When I played, I wouldn't even take an aspirin. But afterwards is when I developed the issue for it. And now it's more of like something will be said, something will be done, and there'll be a complete overreaction to it from me. And I feel almost like I lose control, like it's an out-of-body experience. And I mistreat people and I'm disrespectful. And if you talk to my mother will tell you in high school, I was the nicest kid. I was friendly. Everyone loved me. And then at some point, there was just this drastic shift and change that happened. And I don't want to be that person anymore, because people don't want to be around you. You lose your friends. You lose a lot of people because of those changes. The people that have stuck with me are the ones that have been with me for 20 years and have been my friends forever. And they're just friends with me because they've known me for that long. But had they known this version of me, they wouldn't have been friends with me. So I was just looking for an avenue of treatment and an avenue of hope. Is mental health therapy a good way to go? CBT, I've heard of brain mapping, different things like that. Are all those effective methods or things you can try to see if they make a difference, or medication based is also effective?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about multiple things, right? So like your mental health counseling is always going to be helpful, but it just may not do everything by itself. Yeah, and Kelly mentioned evidence-based therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy is, brain mapping is not. So there'll be certain things that you don't want to waste necessarily your time or money on until you try the things that are more likely to succeed. And again, quarterbacked by someone who is treating people like you. And so we have those people in New York and in Boston. And so we just we get our helpline. I have 4 people full-time who just help out the people who reach out every week to help quarterback their care. This morning, they just asked me to help with a former NFL player's daughter reached out, who, in his 70s, who just gave away a ton of his fortune to, because he's sort of lost the ability to judge what's a scam or not after being told by people it was a scam. So these things happen all the time. But we'll get the team working on you to get you someone you trust that will help you sort of figure out which things to spend your time on. But yeah, I mean, we brought plenty of people back in their early 40s, from places where they thought things weren't going to get better.
And Laban, I know you had a question for Chris about his job specifically that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I've wondered for a while, and for me, as I read Dr. Beneo Malu's book, and then I read your book, I'm a big believer that you're Earl Nightingale, you become what you think about. And I became so depressed reading about basically my demise. And so for you, I'm like, you're always so positive. How do you speak on this on a daily basis and still maintain a positive attitude and not kind of do you just separate the work from the emotion? I'm just really curious how you can continuously do this and not put yourself into a more depressive state, knowing what you've been through, as we all have. So how do you handle that?
So I mean, the answer is I don't think I have a perfect answer as to, why. I mean, there's certainly been times where this is impacted me, and, we deal with sad stories all the time. And you get, it's still strange sort of, in the old days when we were trying to get the brain bank up and running, I started this habit of starting the day reading obituaries to figure out, people to reach out to start to build this momentum. I don't have to do that anymore. Because so many families reach out now, they know what's happening, but still I read them and I know what's going on. And I think from my perspective, it's easier because I don't have severe symptoms. So like for me, I was able to compartmentalize that when I was post-concussed, the reason I got into this, like that was a discrete entity that would get better. And so that was the narrative I would tell myself. And throughout this journey, there have been times where I thought I'm more likely to have CT and more likely not to, based on studies I've been part of, the things that we learn along the way. And I've realized as I've gotten older, and I'm now at 45, I also look at it from the perspective of now that I've been doing this long enough and watching enough people pass away, like I'm going to die of something.
Sure.
And, like, especially being an ex-lineman and all things, now learning about what we do to our hearts by gaining all this weight and the training we do and all this stuff, like something's going to get me. So I don't obsess over CT because it's probably I'm more likely to die from a heart issue as an ex-lineman.
Sure.
And so I sort of look at it that way, like, you know what, as long as I've got what I've got, I'm going to go try to use it to be useful. And I pay attention. And I try to, take care of myself as best I can. And I've, basically stopped drinking, and I've lost weight. I've still got a lot to go, but I have the ability to deal with it. And so I do. And I have a very supportive wife and all that too. That's very helpful.
And I was curious also because I know at one point with Boston University, like they asked for a blood sample. And I know at one point you talked, like, are there any indicators either genetically within the blood that we're passing down susceptibility? What do you know on any of that? Is there any correlation at all?
So what we know at this point is that there are no genes that predispose you to get CTE in any significant way. There are genes that will modify, if you get it, maybe how fast it'll go, how much it'll affect you. And that's the case for every degenerative disease. So some genes will make it go slower or worse, some genes make it go faster, but what we believe with very high confidence is that this is just an environmentally caused disease. You will not get it if you don't get hit in the head a lot or really hard. And so it is, we do focus on that prevention, but we are focused on blood. We started a study called Bank CTE that we're recruiting former athletes to. We're trying to bank blood with people's brains to eventually be studied together. So we know who has it, who doesn't, and we look for the protein signatures in the blood. Okay. That will tell us when people are younger, if they have. Because basically, when your brain's generating, the blood-brain barrier is breaking down, the proteins in your brain are flowing through your bloodstream. We can pick up specific ratios that distinguish CT from other diseases. We'll have something that we can actually then measure as we try to treat something.
Does age necessarily play a factor into it? Like, if you hit a certain age, will you have more symptoms than if you were younger, like a 28-year-old as opposed to a 40-year-old? Like for me, I stopped playing when I was 28 or 29. I really didn't get symptoms until I was 40. So that's why I was curious about that, because I thought I was fine. And then all of a sudden it kind of hits you like a train.
Yeah, so the CTE is progressive. So basically, like you get it at some point during your career or just after. We don't know sort of like the phase between the hit that causes it and when we can pick it up from a postmortem review. But after you get it, age drives progression. So the older you get, the more likely you are to have a more severe version of it. There's 4 pathological stages. We see stage 3 as early as in people in their 20s, and there's only 4 stages. So it can progress quickly in some people, but we also see people in their 70s with stage 1 who we don't think got hit in the head much after their youth. And so some people are probably medically protected or lifestyle protected from having it progress and be severe, and other people are the other way.
Well, and one other thing that I was interested about, because in one of my exchanges with you, I told you how in the 90s I wore a pro cap, and you said, "How'd that work?" Because I had one with a normal helmet as a junior, and then so my mom started making me wear a pro cap where the designer was from Erie, Pennsylvania, my hometown. And so I ended up wearing the pro cap for 7 more concussions, 4 more in high school, 3 in college. And now they make them wear that special cap. Like I think Mike Tomlin, I'm a Western Pennsylvania guy, but he requires his NFL players to wear that. And so I don't know if it was the money thing and Rydell's little warning that if you change this helmet in any way, it defaults. But what is your perspective on that newly brought in the Guardian caps? Because I know you weren't thrilled about, and we know the science of the brain slosh. So talk a little bit about these, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but different things that people try to use to reduce concussion when we know it's more the physics of it than it is any product. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, we can get slightly better with helmets or add-ons to reduce the energy that goes into the brain. Something like the Guardian cap, the NFL has never published their studies where they've made claims on a reduction. They haven't published those studies yet, so we can't necessarily know how confident we should be in those results. I think the NFL does like good headlines around concussion reduction. But we can't, but that may necessarily be true. Not, until I see the studies, I have to sort of withhold judgment. I think, and I think as a culture and then sort of the business side of this is that we all want sort of technological solutions to the problem, but all the advances we're making in helmets are nothing compared to what the advances we could make by like hitting less in practice or starting later in life with tackle football. But nobody wants to talk about that because there's no profit there. It actually could hurt profits. So, we try to put the helmet discussion sort of in its place where it's somewhere in the top 10 things we should focus on, but it's not in the top 3. And we need to, sort of think of it as, when you're thinking about how do you prevent death in automobile accidents, the helmets are the bumpers. Like they're a small piece of the puzzle, but they're not the biggest thing. Your helmet's job, rather than protect you, your helmet's number one job is to protect itself, because helmets aren't allowed to break. So you sort of think about that. There's already an immediate trade-off. And so I wouldn't, don't put too much faith in your helmets is my advice for current players. There's only so much you can do with an inch of space in today's technologies.
Well, but there were even people, like I had different trainers that said it's going to make it worse because you think you can hit harder.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody would make fun of me on the field. And so one guy was covering me on a punt coverage is, "Why do you wear that thing?" They make me because I hit too hard. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but it is interesting because, again, I think you do have those, hey, is this really going to help? And I'm a pretty firm believer if you believe it can come true to a certain extent, but then you get overconfident and reality bites. And that's where, for me at 45, who did start playing early, and my first concussion was wrestling at 6 or 7 years old. I banged my head on the mat, saw the stars, got nauseous, and didn't know. So I know there has something to do with when I got in my accident last year. I didn't hit my head at all, but the whiplash caused concussion. So I didn't matter if I was wearing a helmet or not. The whiplash was so impactful that I didn't lose consciousness, but I knew a week later that I had suffered a concussion. So I'm so much more aware of the potential for concussion. But again, I think who it affects, whether it's 2 or 10, you don't know which one is going to hit the wrong synapse and your life changes forever. So Steve, and the other thing, Chris, I've committed my, brain to science. So for somebody like Steve, if he's going to commit to that, what are the things that you would recommend, through the CLF and what you're doing? How can we help reach out to other people? Like right now, UConn, our brothers are out on a golf tournament for UConn football. And so it was a great day for us to do this because we've got somebody on the ground talking to them about what we're discussing with you to try to gather in the troops and say, hey guys, if any of you, and we know a number of us are having troubles, what can we do to reach out and just find some help?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think, when we talk about Steve, it'll be the helpline, and it'll be like, what studies can we get him into that will get him some free tests? And, we've got what's great now is a lot more doctors believe in this and care about it and want to help. So what I would suggest for UConn is, you mentioned, Boston College. So the BC Football Brotherhood reached out to us because they lost one of their guys, just what they thought was CTE. And they said, we don't want this to happen again. What can we do? And we said, well, we have this helpline, but not everyone knows about it. And you guys have the information for all the guys who are at risk. And so they started blasting out, to that group, hey, this is a free service. And one of the guys even sort of backstopping it for emergencies with some funding. But here's something where you can get help and get advice and find community and find support groups. And we have peer support. And we have all these levels that we've learned over the years are helpful to folks. And so we just got the University of Florida and actually sent it to all of their ex-athletes through the athletic director's office, which was wonderful. And so we're just trying to continue to sort of get these wins of getting the helpline out to those who need it. So I think it would be wonderful if you guys help spearhead that UConn, whether it's, officially through the athletic director's office, although sometimes they aren't as helpful. And that all comes down to a lot of different things, including what their lawyers say, but also whatever alumni groups are there to say, hey, look, let's remember the really good things about being on this team, which was it creates these bonds for life. But then let's step up and actually do this. It's more than just, drinking buddies. It's looking out for those who are struggling, who didn't, have it as good as we do. I mean, I remember guys I beat up, younger guys than me that I beat up on the practice squad, because, you just did it. Now I feel bad, and I've contributed to some of their, issues that could come along. And so,
Great.
So lean in on that. If we get a UConn focused helpline going, that would be great. And then each spring we do the race to NCTE is that we pull together alumni teams to raise awareness of those we've lost or those who are struggling, and try to raise money. And also, again, use that to promote the helpline and look, recalling those guys you haven't heard from, you don't know how they're doing. All this conversation for me, like I have, half a dozen teammates of mine, and weren't that many in our class, have reached out, at my age asking for help. And that's great because these are guys I respect because I was out there, bleeding with them every day for years. And so I do want to help them. And I think, I think lean in on that. I think it's great that you're doing this today. Steve, I think it's awesome that you're sharing your story so that people will do the same and realize that they're not alone in this fight. And also to realize that they can get help. And so, I think this is an awesome connection, and I really hope we can build this from here.
Yeah. And Chris, I think, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Steve.
Having a support group has been the difference for me. Like having Cully has been a lifeline to me. Whenever I go off the rails, she's one of the people who can calmly talk to me and bring me back to reality when I do lose control. And I think having people like that in your life, because not everyone does. Some people have to go at it alone. And having someone there for you to look out for your best interests is very, very important.
Yeah.
Doctor, sorry to interrupt really quick. You've mentioned this lifeline quite a few times, and I don't know too much about it. When someone calls this lifeline, what essentially happens?
So yeah, we have a call for those that need it. We try to do as much of an intake online. So you go to clfhelpline.org. You fill out the
Okay.
form saying, here's my symptoms, here's what I've tried, here's where I live, here's my exposure history, my concussion history, my sports history, and here's what I'm looking for. And then the team, members sit down, they review it together and figure out, okay, so we have this doctor we know that's 20 minutes away, and this doctor we know that's an hour away, and here's a supplemental support if you're looking for something else, and then here's the support group for your needs that meets monthly that you can join, and we come back to you, and here's some educational materials about what's really happening. What do we know? Like if you're worried about CTE,
wonderful.
you might be misattributing like post-concussion syndrome to it. We want to make sure we explain that to you. And so, yeah, so basically consider us like we're referring to vetted folks that we know, or we'll find somebody in your area and then track, how much you like them so we can refer them to the next person. And we basically set it up so that we're sending digital check-ins very frequently too. Because it's not a one-stop, one meeting is not going to fix this. And so we continue to say, no, use us as a resource. If the first doctor didn't work, we'll find you another one. If your symptoms have changed, let's attack those. And so we try to build a long-term relationship to getting you better and helping you come to a community where you realize that, there's others like you and that we have success stories.
Well, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you're very busy. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and giving us really some answers and honestly some hope. And that's really what we needed. We really appreciate it. And thank you for coming on our show. This is Husky Talk, Dr. Chris Nowinski. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Great talk to you all. And do, Steve, be in touch directly so we can get you set up with the helpline. All right.
I will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. All right,
Bye.
Outstanding.
Wow.
Yeah, that was great. Well, you got to make sure you give the proper sign off, brother.
Oh,
But and I was going to mention to him, I think especially now, Steve, with your connection with Phil Hunt, who is my big brother, and him finding his way into that president's office. And it was funny that Chris says you're going to want an attorney. I'm like, well, Phil's an attorney. But Phil will spearhead this for the university and for not only football players, but like Florida did with every sport. I mean, we were fortunate enough at UConn to have such a tight bond with every sport. But I had no idea that they could offer the different testing. And I'm sure, like a lot of us, even in the pro game, they get out and financially they're struggling. And so they don't want to reach out because they might not be able to afford it or they don't have insurance. And so just to give an outlet, a resource is going to be outstanding, brother. I appreciate you sharing, Steve, man. I know that's not easy, but I also know we have, like you said, there is hope for not only your future, all of our future. And I think the best part is that you were the reason that we're all coming together. You starting this Husky Talk, it has been a pleasure for me that just wanted to be a guest one day. And yet you're the salesman you are to where you now have a handful of podcast co-hosts under the Husky Talk umbrella. And in a very short period of time, you've built a brand that, quite honestly, and I'm sure you're getting attention from all these past players and athletes that want to be a part of it, just like I did, because it's exciting. And I think the older you get, you start to appreciate the people, especially that you went through battle with, that, yeah, you lose touch, but man, we have to rekindle that and make sure we're there for each other. And so I appreciate, your vulnerability. I know this is a serious conversation, a serious issue. And I think that's why Chris was willing to do this. He really is big time, but he's seen it so much. And I'm thankful that he doesn't seem to have a lot of the same symptoms you or I deal with, and good for him. But I also want guys that might not have the same symptoms we do to still join and be willing to donate their brain, because they are as important. Like if you played football and haven't had suffering symptoms, we need your brain as well, because I need to know, they need to see what things are different from those of us that have the tau proteins and all this other stuff. So Thank you, brother.
Go. I have to get to work. So I just wanted to say goodbye before I run out of here, but it was nice being on with you.
Yes, it was great being on with you. Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you for being my man's soldier there to the side. We need more people like you. So thank you for your willingness and for your compassion. Yeah.
Well,
Brother.
Even I have to say that was a great show.
Procyon Partners, our sponsor. They are a boutique financial services firm. They specialize in employee benefits, wealth management, and retirement planning. President Sean Rabinowitz is a proud sponsor of Husky Talk, and we appreciate his support and everything he's done. And it was important, that was part of being able to get this episode done. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Laban, putting this all together, being buddies with Chris. And I think this episode will make a big difference.
I hope it gives hope to a lot of our brothers and even our sisters because, I've got 3 female pole vaulters that have all had concussions from pole vaulting. And I pray and hope it's the only one they have. But at the same time, it's not just football. It's a number of instances. And so the more educated we can become, the better we can help others. So thank you for your, again, putting this all together. And it's not the grades you make, it's the hands you shake. But when you strike a chord with brothers and especially brothers in need, I think that's the best part about Chris is that he recognizes his role and his platform. And it was a pleasure to be with him. Always a pleasure to be with you, brother.
Yeah.
So thank you.
We'll talk to the guys at the golf tournament for sure, and make sure we get some people signed up. I think that'll be huge. And I would go to Boston and get evaluated. I think that's the way to go.
I think it would be
really
great.
do.
You're close enough to go see what they're doing. And like I said, I should, it's been 15 years and I did the interviews for 5 years straight. And I don't know what it's all about, but I know they're making progress. And I certainly appreciate Chris and all he's doing and all the doctors, Dr. Amaki, Dr. Cantu, Dr. Omalu, because what they're doing is controversial. And they're going up against big business and all they're trying to do is protect young people.
They're trying to do what's best.
So
they really
thank you. Great job, brother. I was looking forward to this one and we'll do many more, but man, hey, and the other thing is when you said we wouldn't be able to get him, my brother and I used to say the greatest thing in life is doing things others tell you.
Exactly. I called you out and you put me in my place. So you win that one. You win that one.
Hey man, it's all for the betterment of the fellow man. So you're a brother to me. And if you ever need anything, to reach out. But I love doing these with you. So let's keep it going. Let's keep growing the audience and growing.
We'll keep building on them.
And I can't help but be competitive to where whatever Boston College in Florida, I know that's maybe a bad game to play, but if we can get more people in the registry,
I think Phil would be open to it.
Yeah, I would love to be the largest university or the largest number of participants out of New England is the University of Connecticut, so that it's
going to make a difference.
It's going to make a big difference, and maybe not for our kids, but maybe our grandkids, and so. A lot of this, it just takes time and samples. It's just like the rule of 10,000 hours. The more you do, the better you get. And so I appreciate your willingness to do that. I know donating your brain and brainstem for science.
I'm already dead. I don't care about that.
And that's what he's right. But even Chris's point, like we're all going to die of something. Both of us have been in car accidents that very easily could have taken our life. And so I'm not going to let the CTE or potential CTE in me slow me down, but understanding some of the challenges is half the battle. Understanding that. So thank you, brother. I appreciate you this morning. I'm looking forward to getting you better, getting us all better, and just staying healthy and hopeful.
And you got to come to the lake.
I will. Yes, I will be up there before the end of the summer, I promise.
And please ask Megan if she can get me any other teammates that I
Yes.
can have on the show. I got to get more women scheduled.
Yes. So
I
listen,
keep
I
getting called a
was
chauvinist.
mistaken. She told me it was the end of she said August 31st. It's actually July 31st. So she's
Okay.
taking my kids up on next Wednesday, up to the lake house in the Adirondacks, and she's going to Boston I should have her take portable stuff to interview some of the girls, but they're all getting together for a girls reunion. Maybe we should crash
See
it.
if they'll let
we
us.
We should just crash it. Let us. It's just like
I would
Dickie at
absolutely do
Newport.
that. Yeah,
Maybe I'll pick you up on the way.
I'm right on the way.
Dude, don't tell anybody. All right,
I would either do that. I would either do that, or I would have you pick me up and we go up north.
Yeah,
I do either
all
or.
right. We might have to do that. Let me see.
If you have time and you want to do that, I'll do
I'll see
either
if we
or.
can
That's
make that
hilarious.
work. Oh man, that would be great to crash the Yukon field hockey reunion party. And credit to them, they get together not every year, but pretty frequently. And that's what I'm saying. Like the track guys get together every once in a while, not as frequently. But we got to get the football guys together. And I know they're all golfing today, but I want to get them all together so we can, exchange contacts and stay in touch with everybody more regularly.
No, that's exactly what Phil wants to do. Phil wants to pick a game and do like a tailgate with a live Husky talk, and he's really doing a lot to try to promote the show, and he wants us to, be part of the Yukon Athletic website. So
yeah, I think that
Husky talk there. I mean,
well, and you get that CLF helpline there, and it's a one-stop shop for Yukon athletes, both for, and that what a great way to preserve history with all of these stories. And because that's where you're going to have to start going back to some of the old heads. You really are going to have to get into the guys that played in the 60s and 70s
I want to
start knowing what the culture was like. And I think that's what gives that hope. When you're having some dark days, it's like, man, I got too much to do. I got people to talk to. I got people to meet. There's no way I'm not going down without a fight. But having brothers in your corner, we all know, is vital. So,
well, I've been doing what you've been doing and using my calendar religiously, and that's been a huge help.
Good.
That's been a huge help. So
yeah,
I appreciate that. And then I have been trying to be busy and organized, so I'm doing stuff every day, and there's no idle time. And
amen.
I think that's made a huge difference. So your insight and advice has been very valuable. I will say
brother. That's awesome. Well, and again, that's the whole thing, is what works for me might not work for somebody else, but give it a try and just see. But yeah, man, life's too short not to live it up. But thank you again, man. This was great.
Yeah,
Look
thank
forward
you.
to the next one. So sign us off as you do.
I will get this edited, and I can't wait to get it out. And for my amazing co-host, Laban Marsh, this has been Husky Talk. I am Steve Cully, the best podcast host in the universe. Remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges and